speaker today, Judge Gary Fower. I believe I met him at the Robert Harris tailgate party a couple years ago, and Robert said, "Hey, great speaker." So then the other day I was over at doing a little lecture on etiquette at the Jacksonville Bar Association, and Gary was there. He said it's okay to use a non-title name, and so Gary was there, and so I cornered him and said, "Speaking," and so on what? Gary said on metal detecting, and I said, "What?" This is very unusual. So I'm very excited to hear what you have to say, and so just take it away.
Sure. So I look around the room, I know a bunch of folks from different places in my life. You, Cece, we were talking yesterday, and asking about your daughter, Holly, a former student. Bob, I served on my own law firm. I've known Charles for forever. So it's a nice, friendly crowd, and what's even better is I'm not talking about the law. Which is something I'm usually doing somewhere, teaching it somewhere. That was another judge calling me about a teaching gig that he got me into in the fall. So what you have in front of you is a sampling of artifacts from Northeast Florida. So all these come from here. So and they're from different time frames. And so that stuff right there to the left of Doug, and I'm really interested in y'all asking questions. I can tell you what all it is, obviously. That stuff right there is from Springfield, and that is the latest period of time things, and that was from Camp Cuba Libre, which was part of Springfield. That's a Spanish-American War camp, so there really wasn't a lot of activity in the Spanish-American War here, obviously in battles, but they had some jumping off places, and so Jacksonville was one of them. There was a spot up in North Georgia, but they would kind of rally the troops, and so they were down here before they kind of headed down to Cuba. And so that's kind of not, Maine had a fort, and there were several coastal fortifications. You really don't find that stuff a lot. What's interesting in there is there's a hat badge from the Louisiana Regiment, and so they brought those in. Now, if that was a Civil War hat badge from the Louisiana Regiment, it would be like amazingly valuable. But it still has some value. But I thought that was interesting because if you don't find that stuff, you just can't go out and look for Spanish-American War stuff. We got it right here in our backyard. The other stuff is right here is that's all from downtown Jacksonville. They're Civil War mini balls and some little buttons and accoutrements. And what I might do is just walk around and tell you what's in front. This stuff's from Camp Milton on the west side of town. And that was a Confederate camp that was then occupied by the Union. And I've got boxes of stuff from Camp Milton. I started hunting at Camp Milton like right after it was found. Back in the late 70s, and it was actually found by a friend of mine, well, a person I later met who became a friend of mine, and it's from Halcyon and Beaver all the way back down to the headquarters are down there, from that, right at that corner. Someone asked me how I kind of stumbled into that, I'll tell you. The rest of the stuff going around here, and I just may go up and point to it, is they're all, this stuff is all from within 30 miles of here. And so, and I have stuff from all over, but which you might be more interested in. But the stuff sitting in front of Charles McCartney is all Seminole Indian War stuff. And so there's a number of Seminole Indian War forts, and lately that's what I've been hunting. Several Seminole Indian War forts down around Palatka, down around Charles. It's going to be heavy because those are 69 caliber musket balls that they were using, and a hat plate and the little things that are in there are tools. You see a Indian arrowhead, that stuff you can't find with a metal detector, but that stuff pops up when you're sifting around in the dirt.
How do you know the origin of it?
I've been doing it so long that that I know what things are. There's reference books. A lot of the early reference books were all self-published, and so maybe by way of introduction, I can say how I got into this hobby. So my father was a military officer, and my family is originally from Savannah. And so my dad started looking for artifacts as a side hobby around family property. He had a World War II mining town. It's pretty much much all they had in the late 50s and
World War
War II mine detector. Yeah, with a big battery, surplus World War II mine detector. And so, really no one was doing it. They're probably in the country at that time when my dad started. If there were 20 people doing it, it would have been a lot. So the 60s start, then you have the centennial of the Civil War, and then the metal detectors started getting a little bit better. And then there's this whole ream of different metal detectors that have come out over the years, which is another interesting discussion of the technology and state-of-the-art stuff. But as soon as I could walk, literally, I would go out in the fields with him. So it was a father-son thing. And so I pretty much found as much as he did, because oftentimes farmers, anybody ever cut their own grass? So what do you do when you see a rock? You pick it up, you throw it up against the fence, or you pick stuff up and throw it up against the fence when they plow it up. So I had a little general purpose bag from World War II, so like 1942 stitch. And I would walk around looking for things, and picking them all up, and I'd dump the bag. I was like, look at all the stuff I found, Dad. And so when I got big enough to swing one, I started swinging a detector, and they really weren't very good. But to this day, just a couple weeks ago, I was telling them that I was hunting with. I still think that an early brand of a detector found more stuff than even the more modern ones because it was so plentiful and not many people were doing it. And so think of it like going to a virgin fishing spot, and every time you throw your cubicle will be a virgin fishing spot for the most part when they open it up to go down there because there's a lot of great places to fish. And I know the locals fish, but not commercially as much. So this stuff was laying around, not on top of the ground, but those metal detectors were finding it because no one was finding. So you weren't finding a lot of junk. These places weren't beaten flat by rail hunters, gone over and over and over the same spots. And so that's how I started doing it. And then it just became the thing my father and I did all the time. And because when he retired from the Navy, he bought a family business, he had his own business, he could pick up and do whatever he wanted, and he would. And if we were finding things, we would stay for a week or two. When your dad calls the school and says, hey, he's sick, or whatever, he's not coming. We didn't come if we hit a spot that we were finding a lot of stuff in. So we did it all the time. And because we were in Florida, we often traveled out of the state, but we would hit the Seminole war forts that we could get access to. Then we're generally heading up from Georgia, Virginia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and hunting. And like I said, if you did something a long time, all the time, you start accumulating a lot of this stuff. And so the stuff in front of Rob there is more, that's more Spanish American War stuff from downtown in Springfield. And as I move to my right, I start hitting the 1812 stuff. And that stuff there is all 1812 and Revolutionary War era stuff coming from Fernandina Beach. And these little buckles are Liberty buckles. It says Liberty on a hat. They're worn by militia units. They weren't issued, but that little round one right there is the beginning of the cross belt plate, round cross belt plate. So that stuff started around the end of the Revolutionary War, started moving to 1812, and then by the time we get to the Civil War, they have an eagle breastplate that they would have. And the ones in the corner over there, those are 1812 Revolutionary War era. They have like little hooks on the back, like 6 little hooks, and they worn them across their belt cartridge plates. This is interesting. This is from the west side of Jacksonville, and what that is a big penny from the Civil War, and that was the wallet with a little pouch, almost like a little kid's marble pouch. So you can see where it was in the pouch, and you can see the indent over here. So that is an original, basically, wallet from the Civil War, and the penny was in it. I found that at the bottom of a tree, and those are right there. Those are Burnside shells, which is a carbine, Civil War carbine in there, and a piece of a U.S. buckle and a heel plate. And those heel plates have little crosses and hearts and little designs in them, and they put them on the bottom of their, like we put on a heel tab. This is downtown stuff. So you can see, depending on where you find them, the quality of the patina on them. So the stuff that comes from downtown of that good yellow dirt, that's almost like a Cadbury eggshell on it. It's kind of, if you hit it, it cracked a little bit, and then like this is, they come out of the ground with this really nice color. And then the stuff that comes from cruddier dirt, it's more oxidized. And then you see the stuff from Virginia and other places that are real white. See, that stuff over there is real white. So when you tell me that's from the west side, I can tell that stuff came along under trees or roots or someplace that had a lot of acid in the soil. Not all the soil around here is the same. We don't go from red clay to other things, so they're generally in that neighborhood. So you can get them white like that, or you can get them this little cream color. And if I looked at a bullet, I could say, oh, that's a downtown bullet. And you can see this one still has the dirt on it. And that over there has the top of the parrot shell, and we're gonna talk about that in a second. That little cap in the middle is the top of the fuse, and then to the left of it is the very top of the Shanko shell, which is a variant. Almost if you look at it like there's Volkswagens, Buicks, and things. There are all these different variant of artillery shells and fuses that they used during the course of the war. Very interesting war of the Civil War because of all the technology utilized throughout the course of the war. They had a bunch of stuff they never used before, like these. They call them mini balls, not M-I-N-I, but M-I-N-N-I, named after Claude Monet, the French officer who invented those. And the reason they had this style of bullet opposed to what they were using during the Revolution, 1812, and the Seminole War, 1835 to 45-ish, and the first and second is rifling on the inside of the muskets. And so these things will go a long way. Well, those things are like shooting something out of a smooth bore, so they're bouncing down the barrel. Not really bouncing, but they're kind of bouncing down the barrel, not as accurate, and they don't travel as far. These things spin on their own axis, so it's moving and going pretty quickly. And they all weigh like an ounce, so you don't want to hit them. It causes a lot of damage. And so as I move this way, this stuff is down from a big area, Fort Heidelman, which is on Black Creek. And that's still producing a lot of artifacts. And that it was a big depot for the rest of the state. So they would come down the St. Johns River, get it into the Black Creek with the shallow water boats, and they would unload all the buttons and stuff, and then that stuff would start feeding all the forts that were around the state. There's hundreds of forts in the state of Florida.
Was the Civil War the first time that rifling was used?
No and yes, and I'll tell you why. Those boys used Kentucky rifles during the Revolutionary War, but not everybody had one, and they were very, very valuable. And so there's great stories about those Kentucky riflemen coming out of the woods. If you read about the Battle of Kings Mountain, where they shot Bannister Tarleton off the back of his horse up the mountain, never found his body. But those boys, he got them all upset. He was tearing South Carolina apart, burning things, and quite a rascal that guy was. He kind of pissed off those boys with the long rifles, and they made it a point to make sure they got them. And they had a lot of accuracy, but they were using round balls. They weren't using the conical shape.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So, but it was the first time rifle projectiles were used. And so what you had is, like you have today, hundreds of people running out trying to invent the better mousetrap. And so you have all these different types of cannons and artillery shells and fusing systems. And because they weren't so great, a lot of them were very good, and some of them weren't so good. That's why we find the whole ones and the shell fragments are the ones that went off. But lots of times we find whole ones because they were still experimenting. Like I said, everybody went into the government selling them a cannonball for 25 cents or something, and then you have the different types of, like I said, fusing systems, and then you have the industry of the North against the cottage industry of the South. So, but that's on the Civil War side. Here's more Seminole Indian War stuff, and these round pewter buttons are underwear buttons. So they would wear them on their right here on their trousers for suspenders, but we call them underwear buttons. They're made out of pewter, and the rest of them are one-piece buttons. And then there's more of those hat plumes. So you see that those little plumes right there, they come off the dragoon hats, and I actually like those. There's certain buttons I like better than others. And the hat plume have three pieces. It has a round piece, a little flaming bomb, and that tulip is what we call them, and all well kind of soldered together in a little loop on the back, and they set on the top. It's kind of a tall-looking hat with a plume coming out the top of it, like kind of something like it almost looked like a fat drumstick, a furry drumstick coming out made of fur. I don't know how they walked around and wore those things, but they did, and everything was wool in this hot weather. So I make my way around this way, and this is more Seminole Indian War stuff. And now you've got the flints they use in the Hawkins rifles they were using. Here's a hat plume with a flame, that's in the round piece, and the little one-piece buttons. And these flints pop up along with That's called, this type of pottery is a St. John style pottery, Indian, another arrowhead. So sometimes you're walking into the spot and see it, sometimes you're sifting with a sifter and it pops out of the ground so you can see this stuff, and that's a militia buckle right there. So that came from the Georgia militia troops. There's another one floating around in here somewhere. So they came down from Georgia and fought. This is an 1812 up to the Seminole Indian War buckle, and it was a buckle worn on the pants. This is kind of about half of it. But this was found in here, down same area. Underwear buttons, and these little one-piece, they have eagles on them. And some they have different. Some of these are eagle. We call them forage cap buttons. They're an eagle with a shield next to them. And so, oh, there's the other Georgia one. And so they have all these variants of buttons. The 1812 stuff have foliated script A's and I's and stuff for the different units. That stuff there, that's an 1812 Georgia militia plate here that they cut down as a breastplate. So we find them from time to time like that. And that thing on the end is a cleaning tool for this piece right here had bristles in it. And they took this thing, and I don't know, to this day you can find them. You know, the bore snakes for a gun that you just shove down the bore and clean like that? Well, that's the version of that. They just pull it down the gun, and this little thing that looks like a bell on the end, it had bristles in it, and it would clean out where the powder was on the flintlock to keep it clean. So that's a unique little item. As I walk around this way, this is more downtown Civil War stuff. So you see that little patina, really kind of nice patina. I can tell they come from downtown to that yellow sand. When they're digging for places, if they got dark sand downtown, I know it's cover. If I'm getting down in that yellow whitish sand, that's the area of the sand they had during the Civil War. So I'm kind of looking in there. This stuff is from Fernandina on the beach. This came from one of the wrecks, stuff that washed up. I'm not going to say it's a pirate wreck or anything, but it's a shipwreck stuff, and that came right off the beach in Fernandina. And then right here, more Civil War stuff, like I said. And these are percussion caps, because that dime's in beautiful shape. That came right where the library is. This one's in great shape. That all from down there. People go online and sell these things and they say this is a chewed clean bullet. It's got teeth in it. That's not what they did. This thing was chewed on by a squirrel or something. And they made it seem like every week every day there was 100 amputations, but there wasn't. This right here is an eagle eye infantry, the percussion caps. The ball with the two pieces is called bucking ball, so it's almost like a shotgun type of effect. And this piece down at the bottom right here is a bat wing, and it's on the tip of a leather carbine sling buckle. There's a carbine buckle here, that, and then there's a hook where they clip it to the side of the carbine, so when the cavalry was riding, if they dropped it, got shot, they didn't drop their gun, which is dead. So, but I'm really interested in the questions you want to ask about this.
What about this sword or saber?
Now the sword is an 1812 Star contract blade. That was not found in Northeast Florida, but I just tossed it in there because earlier I'd said I had a bunch of dug weapons, guns, like carbines and muskets to bring, and then I thought it was going to pouring rain. I didn't know about the logistics of getting it in and kind of calling in with all these long rusted guns, but maybe we'll save that for another day.
Maybe it stopped you at the front door.
I'm not sure about that. I mean, they're all rusted, you can tell. But that's an like I said, it's an 1812 Star contract blade. If you flip it over, you can see it. That actually was found in an American camp. Look down by the hill, and you can see Star, N Star. And that actually was found at an Andrew Jackson camp at a plantation in Louisiana by me. Now I was telling him I threw it in the corner so we drip paint on it and stuff, and you know, after a while that's a whole nother question how to preserve this stuff. So you want to ask me that, I'll be happy to tell you. But I thought you'd want to ask questions, so I'm happy. Yes.
I have a question. So you mentioned like finding something about its library, you mentioned finding like these little pockets that are definitely developed. So do you just kind of find the spot of grass and start looking?
No, actually, it's a little bit more complicated than that. I actually brought a book over there called War of the Rebellion, and it was a set of 70 of them. That's an original. You can buy them. Non-original, they're on one disc now. And they, so your question you're basically asking is how do you research your stuff? So I'm going to say no. The answer is yes and no, because downtown, the Union troops occupied Jacksonville 4 times during the First World War. And so they were camped all over downtown. So during the Battle of Jacksonville plan, and even today, I always have the metal cutting in the truck. As soon as they crack the ground somewhere, I go running out there with it if I can find it. If they'll let me on it.
So the courthouse downtown?
Well, actually, we did an archaeological dig when I was chair of the programs committee for the Historical Society. We did an archaeological dig downtown, and I had waivers done by the city, and we found a bunch of stuff. And from Hot Wheels cars all the way back to Indian arrowheads on that piece of property. So all around that there before they were getting in there. But so it's kind of easy downtown only because if they crack the ground somewhere, if you think of the fire, as soon as the fire was over, they pretty much either cemented over or bricked over a lot of it. So it was almost like a time capsule. Now they're knocking those buildings down, or they were doing the Better Jacksonville plan, kind of giving us access to that. But generally, you just can't stop and go, hey, gee, I'm going to take it and go over to that. Because in this area, nothing happened during the Civil War. So what you have to do is research, and it's like fishing. I was down in Palatka, 8 hours in the woods and found one musket ball, and like that setup right there. Where is it? A bucket ball setup. 8 hours looking for that on a place that was a known fort because it was beaten flat by relic hunters over the years. So the way you
relic hunter?
What? That is a word.
Relic hunter?
Relic hunter. Yes.
Oh, relic hunter. I'm
Relic
sorry.
hunter.
Yes, yeah. Sure.
Or metal detectorists, or they kind of, some of them will dress their names up to try to get on property by saying this is a Southwest Florida Archaeological Recovery Association. They're all doing the same thing. But so to answer your question, it's very research based, okay? And so back in that period of time, the only thing you really had access to, remember no computers in the 60s, 70s, you had access to those, and there's a naval set of those as well. And then we had access to regimental histories. And so, but you had to kind of dig those out. And they, back in the 70s and 60s, they were expensive. When I say expensive, the book was $50, $75. That's a lot of money back then. It's like when I bought an Earhart coming out of law school, I think it was $75, and I thought it was a ton of money. They're like $400 now or something. So you can get into libraries, and generally in the summertime when it's super hot, that's when you do your research, and then you kind of go out this time of the year because it's hot and there's ticks and lots of snakes. But if there's good places, you go in the summer, you go whenever you have access to it. So I'll read you a little passage from there, because in that book there's several Jacksonville discussions about Jacksonville. And then you see the regiments that are trying to find their regimental histories, match that up, and we would take topographical maps and then overlay a hard sheet of like, what's the filament paper, like clear filament paper, and then start kind of going, well, they said they were at the head of this creek, so we'd start making the lines in there, and then taking old maps and putting them on there and going, I think it's got to go around here. So then you go looking for it, and to this day, if we went out to my truck, there'll be a compass on the other side. I actually get out of the car if I got to go to the woods, and I take a reading with a compass, not my phone. I can use a compass. I know what declination is, and all these things from Boy Scouts. And but now everybody just takes the phone and says, hey, 270 degrees north by 50 degrees. Just kind of walk in looking for it that way. But so there are plenty of times, and I can give you hundreds of stories. If you ask me, I'll be happy to tell you, but I can remember telling my father, I think this camp is to the right off this road. My dad said, no, to the left, to the left. And he wasn't a flexible person. He wasn't used to people telling him no in his job that he had. And so we wade into the swamp, and we're finding nothing. I'm like, this is ridiculous. They wouldn't have camped here, Dad. And I was like 15. He's like, okay, fine, we'll try it your way. As soon as we got on the other side of the road, we hit the camp. He's like looking at me, he never said, hey, you were right. He did. May rest in peace, he wouldn't have done it to this day. He just would have said, hey, we stumbled into it. And so, it's like fishing. Some day you go in and you fill the whole, cooler up. Some days you go out and you don't catch a thing. And so, that's a great question because you have to research. So I'm trying to be being a judge, you're sort of hyper technical on things, and so yes, if you went downtown, you pretty much, if you saw them cracking into a sidewalk, you probably could possibly find something, coins from today back to that time. So that's kind of lucky. You can kind of figure it out. They were down there. But if you're looking for specific camps or where they moved, you gotta do the work to find it. If that makes sense. And then you don't walk out there. Sometimes they're flat fields. Sometimes you're in the thicket of woods and you're saying, why would they have put a fort here? It makes no sense to me. But they had their reasons because it didn't look like that in 1835 for a Seminole Indian warfare or something like that. So yeah, there's a lot of. And today, I'm learning technically because the last couple of times I've went relic hunting, I really didn't come up with much. And the last time I purchased a machine was 20 years ago. And at the time it was state of the art. And it was actually a great machine for hunting downtown because of the way it's configured. It knocks out all the crappy iron and the pop tops and stuff. It just looks for kind of brass. It looks for brass. And so that's a great machine for hunting downtown because downtown is full of junk. You know, just those properties, they're not clean, they're full of all kinds of things that are on it. So it was great for the time, but every time they come out with one, I look at them and, you know, the relic hunters will pump them up because they're getting a piece of it from the company and stuff. Like, nah, I'm not buying until they get a little better. Nah, I'm not buying until they get. Well, the last few times I went out, the guys I was hunting with were like, hey, come over here, see if you get a reading. I was nothing. Their machines were ringing like firearms. I'm like, time to bite the bullet and spend the money and buy some new one, buy a new one. So I actually picking a new one up next week in Orlando, then I'm going to pick a new one. I'm getting 2 new ones, in 2 different kinds in Tampa. So they've substantially increased in price.
I have a question. What's the most favorite thing that you found? And then what's the most valuable thing you found?
So those are 2 good questions. I like artillery shells. So, and I have close to 500 of them, whole ones. I probably have 5 tons of artillery shell fragments, literally buckets and buckets and buckets full. So for me, I loved finding shells, and you know, if it's a rare shell, it's one thing. But what I liked to be able to do is to be able to identify the boat that shot the shell, if it was a gunboat shooting towards a fort on land, or the battery that shot the shell towards whoever they were shooting at, you know, counter battery fire or whatever. And so I did some research and saw a little reference to there's a reference in the OR's repair works at a specific bluff on South Carolina. And once again, I told my dad we were hunting a battlefield in lower South Carolina that they were fighting rear guard actions going up to Columbia. So as they came out of Savannah, after they captured Savannah, the Union troops, Confederates were retreating. They were fighting all these little battles. Coosahatchee, Pocatello, all through these little places. You can see those names when you come up 95. They're right there. Actually, you know, the battlefields went right across 95 and into the woods to the left. And so I saw that little reference, and once again, my dad, we were hunting the Coosahatchee battlefield, and my dad, it was pouring, raining, and we went back to the truck, and I said, hey, let's try this place over here on the other side. And so he's like, yeah, you've always wanted to try to find one drive over there. So I knocked on the door, some old guy came out with the boat ramp, and I said, look, I'm looking for this fort, and I was 14 years old, and he said, oh, you mean over there? And there was this line of trees, and actually there was a complete Confederate earthwork fort with trees growing out of it, and you couldn't see it right there. No guns, nothing left in it, right on his property. And so because of that, we were able to get in there, and it was a really lucrative place for artillery shells. But I could tell which boat shot what based upon what we found because of the armament on the shell. So I could tell the Water Wish shot that shell between this hour, so I could identify the shell to the gun that shot it, which is kind of really hard to do. But, you know, they're shooting tons of cannonballs. You can't kind of do that. And to me, the most valuable thing was a family members. This was another quirky thing in this world. I got an ear infection in South Carolina surfing, and went to the family doctor. That guy had been treating my family all for like 100 years. And my dad, after he retired, bought a family business, and then it was a security business, like locksmith. So he had the wholesale and the retail in it. And we used Savannah as a base a lot because our family was from there. And so we I come out of the doctor's office still trying to figure out to this day why I got a shot for an ear infection, but I did. And my dad they were tearing down lots of places in the 70s, so it doesn't look like, it was always pretty, but it was kind of dingy before the book came out and they revitalized it. Anyway, they tear them down, they take these big 8 and 10 foot doors and they would use them around the construction site to to keep bricks and things from falling, because they were tearing down and renovating. And my dad would go over and give him a couple bucks, and he would take all the escutcheon plates off, the lock plates, the locks, the hinges, because they were all 100+ years old. And he looked down and found a Confederate belt buckle at his feet in the dirt. And so when I came out, he handed me the belt buckle. I said, "Where'd you get this?" He said, "In the dirt." I'm like, "In the dirt?" And I'm like, "Well, we should be hunting here." He goes, "No, we should be hunting where they're bringing the dirt in. They're bringing the dirt in." And so we had a family member who was an Episcopal rector, and there's a famous account in those books of the troops coming into one side of the camp and then the other troops running out the other side of the camp, and they left all their stuff, their food, their baggage and everything, and this rector left the cross that he did mass with, the bell he called him mass with, the blouse that has these Goodyear, they have a cross on them, they're made by Goodyear, and they were rubber, so there were the rubber buttons on the whole smock and all, whatever the little communion kit was and everything. And as they were shooting on one end of the camp, kind of dug a hole, threw it in there, and then took off. And so we'd always thought about where this could be and had no real indication where it was. Well, anyway, we followed the dump truck down to where they were getting the dirt, took the metal detectors out, got in, and found that family member's communion set.
Oh, wow.
So that was pretty amazing. I get choked up. That, to me, I thought was God's work, and it was in a place that we never thought it would be. We would have been 15 miles away from where it was. So that was complete happenstance. I thought it was meant to be. And there's no question what it was, because there's the Goodyear buttons, there's the whole communion set, in an area this big. But it's like, wait a second, this can't be. This just can't be. So it's kind of a little weird. But that, to me, is a valuable thing. But some of the buttons are worth a lot of money. I should have brought a couple, but I'm fearful. Florida territorial buttons are very rare. And so I found several of those in Fernandina Beach. I think they all came off the same smock. Florida didn't have a state seal button during the Civil War, so they had 2 different types of buttons. One they called a Cherokee Rose, had a rose on it. Didn't say Florida. I don't know why they attributed it to Florida troops. Maybe some of them had the jackets. I think they're out of North Carolina. The second one, and you can see it on the flag, is an eagle, very similar to a Confederate button, because the eagle's looking in a different direction over a different shoulder. And the eagle has 13 stars above its head, and it's standing on cactus. And that's the 1835 Florida territorial button. And those are really rare. I mean, they're real expensive if you find one. And so, yes.
In the next couple of minutes, we got like 3 minutes. What about I know we're trying to discuss the law, but is there any legality? You can't go here, you can go there.
Yeah, yes. First of all, you have to have permission. Okay?
Yes.
And so, when I was younger, it was a different ballgame. I mean, even though you can wander on someone's property. I can tell you what it looks like when somebody catches you on their property. They're focused and coming at you fast. What are you doing here? Well, I was on Farmer Burke's property. No. You're like a quarter mile into mine field. What are you doing? And then you tell them, and they have 2 choices. You can get arrested, or they generally are pretty good about But you can't go on federal property, state property. And so, since I was an adult, I asked permission and get waivers, and have different forms of waivers. So when we did the dig on the courthouse site, actually Howard Malls helped me draft. I had him, he wanted to make some modifications for the city. Everybody walked on that property, had to sign a waiver when they got on the property.
Okay.
And so, I always get permission now. When I was younger, it was like, so you really, but they find people to this day. Actually, 2 people that were on hunt with me, like 6 other guys at a fort down on West Palatka 6 weeks ago, just got caught. And I met them for the first time there. Another person put it together, and just got caught on a property in Middlebrook. And I got emails going back and forth. And they didn't arrest them. The police didn't do it. An archaeologist and a historian from down there did. But I think they should have, because they were kind of they knew not to be there and they were there anyway. So it was wrong.
I noticed you have some coins. I'm presuming that you're looking for stuff for historical value, not necessarily monetary value.
Correct.
Have you looked into whether any of the particular coins are?
I can tell if they're valuable, only because, the one thing I've never found is a gold piece. I've never found a cannon. I found parts to them, lots of cannonballs, lots of parts of cannonballs, but I've never found a whole cannon. Always wanted to do that. I've researched that. I've always wanted to own one. They passed me by in price, unless I hit the lottery. But I always thought it'd be cool to have an original cannon. But no, because when I look at them, I know like they're big petty. They're probably worth $5, $10. But when you find the silver seated Liberty dimes and the quarters, then they have different mint marks, like the O mint mark for New Orleans and things. That stuff could start going. But I've never found one where I look and said, oh my gosh, so I can look them up and take a picture of them. There's a program to take a picture of it. Say, is this thing worth a lot of money? So they're worth, to me, what they're found. I've never found one that's worth a ton. I mean, I know guys are looking for them all the time. Looking for hoping to find gold pieces. I was there when somebody found a gold piece right down in Pecolata. A young lady who just got a metal detector and went out to where somebody told her where the stuff was and found a gold. Yeah.
Did your dad find anything?
Yeah, he found a lot. And so, but I just have a lot of this stuff. This is just a little bit of the stuff that was in my office. My house is full.
Everyone's a story. That's what the value is the story.
For me, it is.
Yeah.
And actually, to me, the greater story was not the value of these things, but actually, as I look back on it, it's the time I spent in the woods with my dad. Mm-hmm. And I was sitting there one day on a Friday afternoon, like 5 o'clock, because I won't leave before 5 down there, and staring at a shell I found. And I remember finding the shell with him. I used to have a bunch of them in my office. And I was thinking about, I remember him yelling at me, like telling me I was an idiot or something. And he didn't mean it, but he was like, because this metal detector was going off like a fire, it was like ringing like a fire alarm. And we were like on this point of land in South Carolina. He's like, I said, Dad, I think I hit a car or something. And look at this, it's everywhere. He's like, you idiot, there's no cars out here. We're in this spit of land, a mile in from the road. And it was a whole ton of cannonballs left over by Sherman's army, where they landed on a specific point of land and then set up 2 little batteries, and then they started moving into it and got no resistance, because if they had to fall back to the point to leave, they would have been able to cover their retreat, and they didn't, so they left them. They had so much they didn't care. Whole boxes of bullets. Well, the wood's not rotted away, but crates of Enfield bullets. So, I sat there and thought, hey, I hit a car here. I mean, there's metal everywhere.
Do you have a process if you find something that might be a cannon or something like that, where you stake it out, or like what you see on TV about archaeology, that sort of thing?
Yeah, the archaeologists don't like the relic hunters. So they think that they're really looting and harvesting things. And, I've taken a position, I was quoted in the paper on it, where they did a big deal one time. The archaeologists, no disrespect to them, not all relic hunters are bandits. I've never sold anything, I've given it away. Literally given it away. And but a couple of rotten apples, and they break into places and go into national parks, and they do these things that give it a bad name. But I think what I said was, look, they would rather sit there and watch it get asphalted over and not being utilized, or so you can come speak about this stuff, or let school kids see it, or donate it to a museum, and eventually get to it, and they're never funded enough, and so bless you. And so they would rather let it sit in situ forever and rot away than have somebody take it out and enjoy it and share it with the world. And their position is, hey, if we find these little things, we can tell what regiments were there. Well, we can tell what regiments were. Do the research, and so we know. And so anyway, all the stuff that the Villa Museum has, I donated from that period of time, because I knew that the African American troops, from 1st and 2nd U.S. Colored troops, down from Beaufort, they were mustered in, were right there, Duval and Jefferson. So everything I found right there, I gave to them because they had nothing. So I knew who was there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Probably rambling and we ran out of time.
I imagine the memories of going out with your dad was
So that's the most valuable thing to me, because as I look back, he's gone. Anyway, I have something for all of you, and we'll let you reach in here. And they're not huge pieces. If you want a bigger piece, come see me, I'll give it to you. Get your hand in here,
Oh, what fun.
grab my bag.
Party favors.
This
Flip it over.
Party treats. We're raising the bar here.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Cool.
Better than a cookie, huh?
What'd you get?
Eric.
Thank you.
How
Do you
deep
do
on,
any,
Is there no card in that one?
No,
Hold on, I've got a card.
I don't know what it is.
I'll tell you.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wow.
I thought it had.
Thanks.
For you, Holly.
Oh, I think it's.
do you do any reenactments, or do you?
Never done that. Last time I go on the beach, I've never done that.
Those people are great. They live the life.
Yeah.
So, I just reached into a bucket, stuff from up here in Northeast Florida. And then on the back of my card, it tells what they are.
Yeah.
Some of y'all have 10-pound pieces of 10-pound Union Parrot shell fragments from Illusties. There's a 20-pound shell from Yellow Bluff that's in there somewhere.
How can you look at this and say that's a parrot shell, or is it the
You know,
the location you find it, or?
No, I know what it is, just by picking it up and touching it. And that's not, I hope you don't think that's, but
No, it's your
after
experience.
years and years,
Years of
it's like a
experience, yeah.
mechanic putting your head up next to your car going, you got a bad valve.
Right.
And some pieces are interchangeable. There's one Confederate piece, a thinner piece, laying around in there
So
somewhere.
I was wondering what
That's very cool, thank you.
But if you want a bigger piece for a paperweight, so they're in pretty good shape, and they don't look like that when they come out of the ground. I've kind of thrown them in a tumbler a little bit, and then you just
Okay, so she's got a cannonball fragment, we've got parrot shell fragments. And so we're looking at them going, what's the difference?
think the thickness,
Oh,
and look at the way it's, the way it's curved.
yeah,
Yeah, that's from the shell. And hers, hers is different. You could almost, you know,
It's almost round.
I was online, somebody was saying, hey, I got this shell fragment, what do I do? I said, well, take a compass, kid's compass, and draw it. Well, take a kid's compass, cut a piece of paper out, take the kid's compass, draw it on this arc, and then cut a piece of paper out, match it to the side, and then I think what you're gonna find is you got a 9-pound. You got a 9-inch shell, 9-inch cannonball shell, based on the arc. And so,
geometry.
yeah, and all of the shooting of the artillery shells is all geometry, and it's all, so it's this much degrees with this much powder to get the shell to that particular area. And the fusing systems are real unique on all of them. There's tons of different types of fuses, and about all kinds. And that's a whole different conversation if you want me to lay them all out and you can look at them, and I can tell you what they do. And some are timed fuse, believe it or not. Some are paper timed fuse, where it looks like a cigar they shove in there and clip it, and then it's the fire from the back when the cannon goes off that lights the fuse, believe it or not, like a firecracker. And they're cut at different lengths, so you know, good artillerymen can look up and say, hey, that's a mile from here. It's going to take 5 seconds to get there. It takes 15 ounces of powder to get that far. So they do all that math in their head. Even unsophisticated country boys from wherever, sometimes they carve the calculations into the top of the cannons, and it's all very interesting.
That's incredible.
how deep,
My pleasure.
how deep can you detect artifacts? How deep can you detect artifacts?
So the smaller stuff is closer to the, you know, you lose the smaller stuff the deeper you go. The bigger stuff, you know, we were finding shells with bad metal detectors back in the 60s. But these newer ones go much, much deeper. And so bigger it is, the louder it goes off. The smaller it is, the less it goes off. And so my machines have been eclipsed by the newer ones. And like I said, I'm biting the bullet, bought one, and get rid of another one I go to Tampa next time.
Pun intended?
I'm sorry, what? Unintended.
Bite the bullet, yeah.
I'm biting the bullet. Yeah.
So you're only required